I think it's hilarious how everyone had already deemed this game bad before we even got it, and then we got the DLC, and all of a sudden, no one had any problems anymore. I wonder what the common denominator.
It was Shanks! Do I have to spell it out for you? It was Shanks!
Alright, hello everyone, Soul here and welcome back to my story mode. So obviously this is very much not a video talking about Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl or Pokemon Legends. Now there's a couple of reasons why I'm making this video, however if you don't want to hear what those reasons are and just want to get to the main video, timestamps are right down below for you, as always. So I think that by now it's fairly obvious and very fair to say that it's been very dry when it comes to Pokemon news as of late. The only real thing that we've gotten in these last couple months is a very small snippet of gameplay from the new Switch reveal trailer. First off, I'm not getting that new Switch even if my life depended on it. It runs practically the same as the original Switch, the Joy-Cons are basically the exact same situation, you're just paying another $350 for the exact same console, and honestly, I just can't really get behind that. The one thing that is worth it though is definitely that dock. It has an Ethernet port. As somebody that plays online with pretty decent internet, I gotta say, it would be nice to finally stop fighting people in Smash with that McDonald's Wi-Fi. But I digress. Anyhow, in that trailer, we got a very small snippet of a trainer trying to fight or catch a Buizel. I completely forgot, but really I only watched the trailer once because I'm like, there's really nothing here. There's nothing to look at, they gave us a very small snippet. It's not enough to cover. You could definitely tell in that trailer that graphically, it's definitely improving a little bit. But again, we got these games announced to us about 3 months ago now, so developing graphically is kind of a mandatory. So personally, I'm not really shocked, nor is there really anything to talk about in that realm right now. So I'm gonna have to step away from it every now and again because trying to think of content for that kind of thing is kind of exhausting, to be honest. I can only truly work and speculate with literally nothing for so long, you know what I mean? So of course, as usual, if I come up with anything to talk about, I'll talk about it. But other than that, I'm not gonna force myself to dig that hard when they are literally giving us really nothing else to work with. So for the time being, until we get some kind of news, we're gonna be doing a little bit of reminiscing. Okay, we're reminiscing. What the hell is this video about right now? Why are we talking about Sword and Shield again? Well, if you actually take a look back on my channel, you'll recognize that I only recently became a PokeTuber. Before the beginning of this year, I was literally doing whatever I wanted, but Pokemon is what stuck and here's where we are, and that's not a problem to me. I love Pokemon to death. However though, I find it kind of funny that despite me having full playthroughs up when it comes to Pokemon Sword and Shield, I don't even have a review for it. Now, let's not get things twisted here. This is not a full-fledged review. That is not what's happening here. That's gonna come for the other games, not Sword and Shield. I think it's a little too late for that. However though, I have kind of organized it in a way to feel like it is somewhat of a review without it being a full review. Does that make any sense? So just think of this as like a review stand-in. Throughout the 2 years that we've had this game, we've all had mixed opinions about it for sure, and I think that it's about time that we actually start having a conversation about whether or not this game is truly as bad as a lot of people say, and maybe this will help figure out what Pokemon as a series can do better as it goes forward. So I think I've just about said everything that I needed to say. Why don't we start getting into the main point of the video? Is 8th Gen as bad as people say? Now, like I said, this is not a full-fledged review, so I've organized it a little bit differently. Instead, I've organized it like this. I'm gonna talk about what the game did better than previous games and what it did worse than previous games. To start things off here, why don't we talk about the good that Pokemon Sword and Shield brought to the table? Now, I know a lot of people may have mixed opinions about this, but personally, I think it's not that bad of a thing that they introduced Dynamaxing. The mechanic in of itself is actually fine. I didn't really have that many problems with it. I actually thought it was pretty damn neat. I just thought that as a mechanic, the only place for it to actually work would be in Galar because that's how they wrote the story for it. They themselves are the ones that said Dynamaxing and Gigantamaxing are exclusive to the Galar region. Having this feature in the 4th Gen remakes would have been them retconning it and shooting themselves in the foot. As its own mechanic though, I thought it was totally fine. After discussing it for so long and thinking so much about it, I think I've started to like Dynamaxing a hell of a lot better than Z-moves. Now I can't speak on it too much in a competitive aspect, but as a casual player, I very much enjoyed it. I mean, come on, who wouldn't want to ride on a building-sized Shinx? That would be amazing. Moving along here, I gotta say that the quality of life is definitely at its highest in Sword and Shield. It just really goes to show how far we've come from the original couple of games. We don't need HMs anymore, which means we don't need HM slaves. When you pick up or buy a TM of any kind, that's it, you now own that TM. So if they have a crappy moveset, hey, just throw a return on there. That's probably just a little bit better than the alternative. We now have access to literally everything we would ever need in a Pokemon Center. Now if we mess up on a letter or something, we don't have to wait till halfway into the game to hunt down the nickname raider so we can change our Pokemon's nickname. We also don't really have a need for a move deleter at all, which I can't even remember if that's a thing in Pokemon Sword and Shield, but either way, we have somebody that has access to every one of the possible moves that Pokemon could learn. Well, obviously besides egg moves, but that's beside the point. What's crazy is that man teaches your Pokemon whatever they need to know at the hefty price of absolutely free. If you pick up a Pokemon late game that you feel should know a certain move, just take it right back to him and that move's gonna be sitting nice and pretty for you right there. It's just so convenient and absolutely helpful to always have. And speaking of switching things on Pokemon of any kind, I gotta say, being able to change your Pokemon on the fly without the use of a PC is one of the best things they could have added. Now this was a feature that was actually introduced in Pokemon Let's Go, but that's obviously because Pokemon Go players never needed to switch out party members or anything like that, because for a while, parties weren't even a thing, really. For the most part though, I think it's a mechanic that transferred over really well into the mainline series, and I don't really see it going anywhere. In a way that might have the effect on the usefulness of a regular PC, but I think that's a discussion for another day. Right now, I'm just gonna say that having access to them at any time is very convenient. The next thing that I'm gonna go ahead and praise is the character customization. This game has the best customization since Gen 6, easily. With the solid variety of options that they gave us, we were able to mix and match as we pleased, and that is something I can't complain too much about. Hell, they went deep enough to allow us to have contacts. We could have stars in our eyes for Pete's sakes. Hell, fire! If we really wanted. That's one of the most anime things the games have done in quite some time. Anyhow, what I'm trying to get at is, this is a very small thing, but since one of the main purposes of Pokemon is to really place yourself in the shoes of the trainer, being able to customize them any way you want and make them as different as possible from anybody else on Earth is potentially the best way to do that. I just appreciate being able to dress up as fun or as ridiculous as I want. No limits. That's beautiful. Moving along here, the next thing that I want to talk about is actually the fact that this game has possibly had the best rivals since 5th gen. Now, if you know Pokemon, you know that rivals are a very crucial part of the system now. Having somebody to constantly battle and race against to be the Pokemon champion really helps motivate the player. We've proven that since Gen 1. It's always been a thing. Within the last couple of generations, the rivals really left a lot to be desired. We had like 5 rivals in Gen 6 and I couldn't even tell you the name of one of them. In 7th gen we had Hao, but he was more of a friend than a rival. And I'm gonna throw Let's Go in there just because it was the Pokemon game that took up the slot for 2018. Trent, or whatever the hell his name was an actual embarrassment. He's debatably just as bad as the 6th gen gang, but at least I can remember his name. But to be completely honest with you, I'm not even really sure that's his name. But I don't think I care enough. Moving back to 8th gen, we had 3 very specific rivals. Each of them were pretty memorable, and if anything, they at least had a tidbit, very minute amount of development. First, we had Hop, who was kind of following in the footsteps of his older brother, only to realize that he didn't necessarily have to go down the same exact path. Eventually, he came to the conclusion that he didn't have to be like his older brother and he could choose his own path, which is why he decided to become a Pokemon researcher. Very random, really not a lot that led up to that, but it was something. Then we had Bede, who was kind of a jerk because he thought that he was better than everybody because he got endorsed by the chairman. He eventually also came into terms with the fact that he didn't have to be exactly what the chairman wanted and he didn't have to be raised in his image, and he decided to take on the mantle of being the fairy-type gym leader in Galar. And then finally, we have Marnie. I'll be completely honest with you, Chief, she doesn't really do all that much. She wanted to become the champion so that she could help support her hometown Spike Myth. But unfortunately, she entered the gym challenge at the same time as us, so there was just no way that was gonna happen. Whatever the case may be, she ended up as a gym leader in her hometown. So it's not a lot, but it's definitely something, and definitely a hell of a lot more than I could remember off the top of my head in comparison to the last couple of generations of rivals. I'll say it like this, even though they left a very minor impression on me, they managed to leave one at all, and that's a lot better than a lot of other characters from previous games can say. So anyway, how's about we start moving on here? Now personally, I believe that debatably, this game has some of the best longevity in the series to date. At the very least, for me personally, this game has gotten an absurd amount of hours out of me. When it came to Pokemon games, 9 times out of 10, I was never inclined to go out of my way to shiny hunt. But this time around, getting the shiny charm has been the easiest it's ever been. And now there's so many different methods and abilities that help speed up the process so much that I thought, you know what, this could be fun. It was hell, but it was a good kind of hell. Does that make sense? Alright, fine, so shiny hunting isn't exactly the best example. Fine, but raid battles and raid adventures? Do not sit there and tell me that you and your friends didn't do that for hours on end when that stuff first came out. I'm telling you right now, the moment me and my friends were able to do raid battles together, that was a wrap, chief. We lost track of time doing all those raid battles back to back like that. It was very fun and unique to finally do something that wasn't just battling against my friends online. I'm always up for some good mindless fun, and raid battles and raid adventures, that was it. Most definitely. So if there's anything that I could appreciate coming out of these games, it's definitely the mechanic of raid battles being implemented into the main series, or at the very least, for this generation. If there's anything that they did a pretty solid job on, it was that. Now the last thing that I'm gonna say here is just the fact that I appreciate how accessible all of the extra content for the game is. You could say a lot of things about the DLCs, that they were given to us too late, or that they weren't really that much of a big addition to the game, whatever. But at the very least, you have to admit, it's solid extra content, and it's always available to us. The last couple of generations didn't even really add any kind of DLC or extra content. And then we had the games beforehand that did have extra content, but that content is completely locked legally now. At least nowadays or down the line when somebody decides to finally get Pokémon Sword and Shield, if they want the DLC, they always have access to it, as opposed to that one-time situation where it was an event that if you weren't there for it, well that just kind of sucks. Come on now. So that just about does it for a lot of my upsides when it comes to what Pokémon Sword and Shield did better than the previous games beforehand. So now, why don't we go ahead and move to the other side of the discussion. What did Pokémon Sword and Shield do worse than the previous games in the series? Now this first one is most definitely debatable, mostly because it could just be associated with age, but I'm just gonna say it anyway. Difficulty is at an all-time low with this game. And when I say that, I mean that there's no diversity in the route exploration because there really was no routes to explore, and unlike the previous games, this one doesn't have HMs, so there's really nothing standing in your path to move forward this time around. Besides the couple of trainers that might stand in your path, including your rivals every now and again once in a blue moon, you could just go to the next town and just battle away. There's no crazy convoluted bases that you have to maneuver around or anything like that. You move forward and that is that. There's no real puzzles for you to get through, and as somebody that doesn't even really like puzzles all that much, even I gotta say, that's kinda disappointing, man. I miss first gen when we would have to go through Team Rocket's base and do those crazy spinning puzzles. Or in third gen when we had to maneuver around those insane teleporting puzzles. Hell, Team Galactic's bases reutilized that idea in 4th gen, but you know what? I still had fun with it. The most you get is probably the gym puzzles, but even those are just bat crap easy. There's also a fact that there's rarely a threat to you or your team because you can get so overpowered so easily in no time at all. There were only 2 times that I could think of where I actually had any trouble with the mainline story. The first time was when I first battled Leon and realized that his Pokemon were on par with what I thought to be my overpowered Pokemon. That was the only time where I recognized that that man really was unbeatable for a minute. I managed to get through, but I'm not gonna sit here and say that I didn't struggle. The only other time that I ever had trouble with the game was because I did an entire Nuzlocke. Very specifically, a trade lock, where I literally could not use a Pokemon until I got it from somebody else, and the game literally would not allow me to pass up that level cap. They were very strict with that. Besides that, what I'm trying to say is, besides Leon, the only way that I actually ever had a challenge was when I had to challenge myself and create hardships and whatnot for myself to play through the game. It was still decent, but sometimes it's just kind of frustrating that they obviously very clearly recognize that the older players are still very much playing, but don't do anything to accommodate for them. Hard mode is very much a thing in RPGs now. I just don't understand why they couldn't do it. Whatever. One of the next biggest problems everybody had is the fact that this game is graphically just completely inconsistent. Trees and grass didn't really match each other, water looked ugly as hell. It just didn't make any sense for a 2019 game. And then sometimes when you were in the wild area, if there was more than like 6 to 7 things happening on the screen, that frame rate went right into the frickin' toilet. Again, we've had this discussion, but 9 times out of 10, people say that Let's Go looked hella better than Pokémon Sword and Shield. And that's very alarming for a game that came out before it. But I think that most people were able to so easily say that because the styles of everything that they had in the game matched very well, and it was a very easy game to look at. Most people probably felt that this game was so ugly looking to them because it feels like we took a fat step backwards. Like seriously, how the hell does something like that even happen? There's also the fact that the models of the trainers looked totally fine, but when it came to the models of the Pokemon, they looked okay, but they were just ported models over from the 3DS, when they clearly said that they were going to change that up. So where's that change? Why did that not happen? What's going on here? Hell, a lot of people say that they prefer the sprite models from the DS days. Damn! So at the end of the day, when it comes to the graphics, it's not the ugliest game I've ever seen, but good golly, it is definitely far from the prettiest. Moving along here, the next biggest problem that everybody had, and possibly the biggest problem at the time, was the fact that this is the first game in the series to not have full Pokédex access. It's almost exhausting to bring this up again considering how many times we've talked about it, but here we are again. Long story short, they made the promise that the sacrifice of half the Pokédex would not be in vain because the game would look a lot better because of it. Quite obviously that did not happen, so a lot of people were very upset with the outcome. It's also twice as weird because this has literally never been a problem in the series before. It wasn't a problem for 5th gen when they animated every single sprite. Wasn't a problem for 6th gen when they had to remake all of the Pokemon in 3D models. So what the hell is this about? Point is, it was a huge problem, huge enough for it to hurt the experience of a lot of people, so that's a huge thing. I'm done talking about this. We've talked it into the ground, so let's just move on. The next huge thing is that the story is practically non-existent. Team Yell was advertised as the quote-unquote evil team of the game when really they didn't even do anything. If anything, they were actually very helpful. The real quote-unquote evil team didn't even show up until the end of the game, and they were 100% a pushover. Hell, it barely had a reason to exist. The only problem was that somebody wanted to deal with a situation that was thousands of years away. They wanted to take care of business now, and they set things off too early, and they paid the consequences for it, that we had to deal with. That was it. That was the extent of that story. At least 6th gen had an evil team, and you know what? I'll say this for 7th gen, at the very least, it definitely had a story. It made you think that Guzma and Team Skull were the actual evil team and that they were actually somewhat of a problem, but they were just more of a forefront for the actual evil team, and you know what? I can get behind that. They plot twisted me, kind of. I saw it coming, it was very predictable, but it was more than what we got in 8th gen, is all I'm saying. You guys may have heard me say this once or twice, but it felt like when I was playing the game, I was waiting for the story to happen the entire time. Like, yeah, it was very fun doing the gym challenge and it was a good distraction, but whenever I would be done with that, I was expecting, okay, now something has to happen. Something has to get in my way to stop me from progressing, right? But no, I just gunned my way through, no problem. The best part of the story was probably the final battle against Eternatus, but other than that, I can't say there was much going on for it. At the end of the day, the story was very weak, and the only game that I could think of that did a story weaker than this one was 2nd gen. But again, it's debatable. Moving on. My final biggest gripe is just the fact that a lot of us didn't feel like we truly got the full game until the DLC was finished. Now, we already know and have talked about it extensively. Them releasing DLC as content that we feel should have been part of the main game is a very common practice in the gaming realm this day and age. But it's one of those situations where it's like, oh, everybody else is doing it, so we could do it too, right? Now come on, y'all could have spent a little extra development time to get raid adventures into the game before the end of its life. Come on, guys. It's also how they got us to shell out more money for more Pokemon access and Pokemon Home so that we could save our Pokemon somewhere, because before then, we didn't really have anywhere to store our Pokemon. And it's very frustrating to see a very beloved series turn into something like this, just a quick cash grab. That's really sad. All we know is that there is absolutely no reason that they gave us the game so early when they could have touched up upon it a little bit more and gave us some of the stuff that the DLC could definitely have offered a little bit earlier. Under normal circumstances, we might have figured it to be a one-time thing, but being one of the biggest franchises on Earth and that they're constantly earning money, and because we shelled out so much money for this DLC in Pokemon Home, they're now probably thinking that doing something like that on a regular basis is gonna be okay. And that really sucks, but unfortunately there's not much we can do about that mindset now. It's just one of those things where because this game decided to do it, it may hurt the future of the series for the worse. And that right there is why it's so frustrating and alarming, but what can you do now? So that right there just about does it for all of my thoughts on how this game did not do better than other games in the series. All in all, this game is just something that did not live up to the expectations that everybody had for a 2019 Pokemon game. Back in like 2009 or 2010, we expected something along the lines of Pokemon Legends by now. Even that game is debatable, but I think a lot of us that were young during that time kind of gets the idea of what I'm talking about here. We just thought that the series would be so much farther along by now because they've learned from their past mistakes, but apparently that doesn't really seem to be the case, and they've definitely showed that because of how the way the Pokemon company is being run. Or at the very least, it shows in their games, most definitely. So personally, I'm gonna say that it was definitely a lot more memorable than the couple of games, those games being like Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon and Pokemon Let's Go, so I will certainly give it that. But I think that it's also a valid argument to say that the bad will always outweigh the good when it comes to this game. There's definitely a lot of good points that the game has, but the bad points are just so heavy and so unnecessary that it kinda makes the game overall look kinda bad. It really does suck to look at it that way, but it's the truth. That right there is the whole reason as to why that game ended up with the status of okay within the Pokemon community. And it's just frustrating because there was no reason for it to just be okay. But hey, there's nothing we could really do now. All we can do is hope and pray that Generation 9 does us some real justice, because the remakes are kind of mid so far, and Pokemon Legends, we just simply don't know enough about yet. But whatever the case may be, we have a lot coming for us. The Pokemon series is always going to be on the rise, and we just have to wait and see what happens for us. So that just about wraps up my thoughts on if Pokemon Generation 8 was as bad as we remember. If I had to give a general verdict, I would say that it had a lot of potential to be the best, but because they squandered it so hard, it ended up in a place where it didn't need to be, and that's what makes it kind of a not so good game in the general aspect of Pokemon. But if you wanted a yes or no answer, I guess yes by technicality because it's probably one of my bottom 3 Pokemon games. But I think that's a little bit better than my number 1 least favorite, which is definitely Gen 6. But maybe we could talk about that another day, because I don't know, I had a lot of fun talking about this. Maybe we can make this a little bit of a series and talk about all of the previous generations and see if they were as good or as bad as we remember. I don't know. That sounds kind of fun to me. So, you guys let me know. I'm gonna go ahead and pass the mic to you right now. How did you guys feel about Generation 8 as part of the mainline series? Did it get unnecessary crap? Is it better than people thought it was? I want to hear all of your guys' thoughts in the comment section below because I'm always down there. And also, tell me if you guys want me to make this a series. I'm gonna ask it in the comment section below because, you know, this end part may get ignored, so I'm going to put it down below too. But for anybody that's hearing this, should we make this an ongoing thing and talk about all the previous games while we wait for these remakes to come out? Y'all let me know. However, I think that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for me. It looks like skedaddle o'clock, so I'm going to just go ahead and do that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I truly do hope you enjoyed. Make sure to drop a like and a comment and consider subscribing for more content just like this and any and all news when it comes to the remakes and things like that. But with that, I'm out. Thanks again. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next chapter of my story mode. Do me the greatest favor of taking good ass care, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!